Welcome to another edition of the Block O Show here on Scarlet and Gray Sports Radio and SGSR TV. I'm Caleb Spinner, alongside me Matt Goldman, Kole Emplit, and Tyler Danburg, back with you for another week. Fresh off of 2 straight road trips as our SGSR crew. Good to be back home for once. I for one, love the Jerry Emig breakfast in the press box a little bit more than I have the trips to Penn State, and then I'm sure Tyler can give a recommendation or his opinions on the Northwestern one, but it's always different when you can just go up at halftime and grab a McDonald's frap.
It's just fun to see all the different spreads around press box across the Big Ten. A great Italian feast at Ryan Field last week, but it's good to have some great beverages at home, including those frappuccinos.
And now I'm glad I didn't waste my time with the road trip, because if they don't have Portillo's in the box, I'm not going to anywhere near Chicago. Okay, that is the gem of that city, besides maybe the Blackhawks. But there's a stretch there. That's a conversation for another day. The other fun part about being home, gentlemen, other than we get a relaxing trip where we don't have to go back a few hours, is we are finally rid of that cougar, cat, whatever sound effect that Penn State and Northwestern have used. I am not a fan of that thing.
That was annoying.
I am not a fan of how much they use that and the sound effect that they use that. I get it. I get it.
Wait,
it's used too often.
Did they do it at Northwestern too?
Yeah, they did it.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's eerie.
And for those that aren't familiar, we aren't going to recreate that because it just doesn't do it justice, but it sure is something.
Yeah, it's something. To be completely respectful to it, we'll just leave it there. But looking back once here, we'll start our show. We'll start the actual business that you come here for, not this back and forth banter to start off the show. But let's look at the last time outs for Ohio State, Indiana, of course, that being the opponent this week at Ohio Stadium at 12 o'clock kickoff. Ohio State, they won a windy game in Evanston, Illinois, and I feel like that's putting it lightly, against the Northwestern Wildcats, 21-7. C.J. Stroud, this is the big kicker for me, is he ran more than he threw. 79 yards on the ground for the Ohio State quarterback compared to 76 through the air. This is the first time that we've seen Stroud win a game with his legs. Arguably, he, of course, influenced the games before with the running game, but this was a true passing game's not working, I got to find somewhere else. It moved him past Tennessee quarterback Hendon Hooker to become the favorite for the Heisman Trophy. Cole, is Stroud a danger running the football, or was this just a performance of him seeing holes that Northwestern opened up and taking advantage of them?
I mean, I'd say both. I mean, even the Ohio State game notes you look, it was 55 was the most wins in Northwestern. So you definitely had to be able to run the ball, and for Stroud, he took what was given to him like we talked about. There was a couple plays where the defense completely bought in, whether it was Mayan Williams running or anyone else in the backfield. They completely bought in, and that gave C.J. Stroud 20 yards running. People forget he's an athlete. He's a big athlete, and he can be able to make the plays on the ground when he can. And I just think it's also a decoy in my theory. I think Ohio State's kind of putting this away all year, so when they get to that Michigan game, Michigan's not going to be really know what's going to hit them. I think they're kind of saving him away. We kind of saw just a little bit on Saturday against Northwestern. He's an athlete. He can run the ball, and I think we're going to see it more.
I'm going to direct this next question at Matt because I know he's looking, being the Giants fan that he is. Does Stroud become a more desirable NFL talent to scouts after showing off what he can do with his legs when the passing game's not there?
Yeah, it's a good question. For CJ, something that scouts have talked about is his pocket awareness, and the development with running the ball has not been amazing until we saw this past weekend. I think he is more desirable in the GM's eye at the moment with the way he's able to use his legs and able to move outside the pocket, which we have kind of seen him just stay inside all year. And that was one of his big flaws. And I agree with Cole. It's a decoy for what I believe will be used in the Michigan game because, again, he is an athlete. He was a 5-star recruit for a reason. He wasn't a pocket passer when he was recruited. He was a dual threat quarterback. So for now, CJ having these abilities, I think is something that NFL teams are really going to like. And I think GM's eyes are going to open up after last week's Northwestern game.
Follow-up question. Do you dream at night about what number 7 looks like in Giants blue and red?
I do. But my boy Daniel Jones is playing really well right now.
Yeah,
6-2.
Don't get me wrong. I'm a fan of the divine number 9, but I don't think there's any Giants fans who would argue if C.J. Stroud went to the New York Giants and played up there in Jersey.
I wouldn't argue. But with the way the Giants are playing, I don't know if they'll be able to get him all the way up at the top of the draft just because of how good they've been playing.
Okay, let's cool it down here. All right, the best team in the NFL still has yet to get their shining jewel under center, and of course that's referring to the team up north in Cleveland. But now switching over to Indiana here, getting off the NFL topics. I know Matt and I could push each other's buttons all day long on this subject, but focusing now, Tyler, Indiana has, to put it nicely, had a rough go of things. They lost at home against number 15 Penn State last week, 45-14. It extended IU's losing streak to now 6 games going back to September 24th against Cincinnati on the road against the Bearcats. All 3 Hoosier quarterbacks have seen, well, 3 Hoosier quarterbacks, I should say, saw action during that game. Jack Tuttle, Dexter Williams II, and Brendan Sorsby. This is not the first time that we've seen a quarterback-confused team in Indiana, going back to the last time last season Ohio State played Indiana in that 54-7 loss, seeing that quarterback battle between Tuttle and Donovan McCulley. Is the inconsistency at the quarterback position the biggest thing to blame Indiana's lack of success for?
I think it definitely has to be one of the biggest things to blame, because all 3 quarterbacks that you mentioned played last week at Penn State. None of them were the number 1 on the depth chart. That is the Missouri transfer and Connor Bazelak, who did not play last week's game. Now, Tom Allen did say heading into this Saturday's game that Bazelak will be ready to go, but it has to be an inconsistency, and it has to be an inconvenience for Indiana, because they have a strong receiving core with a lot of transfer tight ends, a lot of receivers and running backs that can do a lot in the passing game as well. And when they are at the bottom of the Big Ten in passing offense, averaging just a little bit under 330 pass yards per game, that definitely has to be a concern for Tom Allen, Walt Bell, and the Indiana coaching staff.
And I have a feeling when we get into our players to watch, we'll talk more about Connor Bazelak and what he brings to this Hoosier squad. But first, we got to talk about the Ohio State players to watch. For me, it's the Buckeye receivers. It's all of them. You can't pick one. As we've said numerous times on this show through this season, there's more than one who's a threat to opponents. So it's better for me, I think, to talk about that unit as a whole rather than just picking 1 or 2 out of it. The lack of production last week against Northwestern, I would say it's excusable. You have wins that are completely uncharacteristic of what usual playing conditions are for football. So it's fair to say that the lack of production was more of the fault of the extreme weather than the lack of talent or the off day, if you will. Now, this is the chance at home not having to deal with that, of course, according to the forecast, weatherman being one of the only positions you can be wrong 50% of the time and still have a job tomorrow morning. But this is going to be the option that Ohio State needs to get the headlines back to, wow, this team is good, rather than, well, you know, who's to blame more, the weather or the passing game. So I think this is going to be a big game for the Ohio State receivers. We'll start with Tyler and we'll move over towards Matt. Who is or who are your Buckeye or Buckeyes to watch in this game?
Emeka Egbuka is mine for Ohio State, and not just because he's a Paul Hornung Award finalist, which was just announced this week, guys, but also, in addition to his receiving prowess, Ohio State, seeing that the weather was going to play a factor in last week's game, they gave Egbuka the ball on the ground. They got him involved in the jet sweeps. They got him involved with those wide receiver design carries. Look for him to just continue to be that Swiss Army knife, not just in the air, but on the ground as well.
Yeah, for me, I think I have to back it up as well. I mean, of course, saying that, yes, the receivers need to have a great game. The offense needs to have a great game. Of course, C.J. Stroud only threw under 80 yards against Northwestern. Again, bear the conditions, but the offense needs to have a big game. For me, however, I just want to see the defensive line, see what they can do this week. Specifically, of course, it was a game where against Northwestern you could not pass the ball, and that was either team. But Ohio State's defense gave up 206 yards rushing, which is about 100 more than they're normally capable of doing. Like we said, the wind definitely plays a factor, but I really want to see how the defensive line wakes up, and this is a time to do it. You're going against, not to knock on Indiana, but a mediocre Hoosiers team. So see how you can really get going, build some momentum up before you go into those last 2 games of the season.
Mediocre is a nice word to put it. Just saying. Marvin Harrison Jr., I think he is just the guy for Ohio State. He's done it all for them. He was the saving grace at the end in the Penn State game. All 10 of his receptions were first downs. And if you can have a guy like that as one of your threats on the outside, you're going to win this game. And with CJ, it's just getting the ball in the hands of Marvin Harrison Jr. and for Ryan Day to call play specifically oriented for Marvin Harrison Jr. there is no cornerback or safety in the Big Ten that can cover Marvin Harrison Jr. Tywan Mullen is the closest thing you'll get for Indiana, but it's not going to be enough.
Players to watch for the Hoosiers, I think there's one clear one here, and it's Connor Bazelak. We've mentioned him already. He's coming in for Jack Tuttle, who was announced to be out for the season. Specifically, what I'm looking for from Bazelak is how well he plays and how early he gets on his game, if at all. I think it's a big indicator of not only how Indiana will play in the game, how he acts early on, but also looking at his game as a whole. I think it's a big indicator of where Indiana's going the rest of the season. Already out of bowl contention, so there's not much more you can hope for aside from the games you're guaranteed being in the rest of the regular season. But if you want any indicator of how they're going to go, Bazelak being the guy going forward, he's going to have to play against Ohio State pretty well. We'll go reverse order for your guys, starting with Matt and ending with Tyler.
I'm going to say Jalen Lucas this week. He's 6th in the FBS in kickoff yards per return with 28 yards. Ohio State's not been the most sound on the special teams this year, especially when it comes to coverage. If Indiana could take any advantage of Ohio State, I say take it on the special teams. I think defensively and offensively is where they're going to struggle. And if Lucas can return against Ohio State and find that little hole, that can give the spark in the offense for the Hoosiers.
Yeah, I definitely kind of want to see how they do in the run game, just because Indiana, as we're looking at right now, in terms of rushing offense, 129th in the country. And knowing that we're talking about the QB inconsistencies going on, I just want to see what they can do on the offensive end, specifically running the ball. So you got to look at Sean Shivers, who does lead the Indiana running back room. He only has 4 touchdowns on the year, averaging just under 4 yards. But for Indiana to have any hope in this game, we always talk about you have to establish the run game, and Indiana's definitely going to need to do that Saturday.
And Josh Henderson, Tyler, to include in that running back room, it's kind of like what Mayan and Travion are supposed to be like. They both are playing what they've been playing up to. They're playing up to their standards. And Ohio State's faced running back by committees all year with Katrin Allen, Kayvon Lee, and Nicholas Singleton. Penn State they just faced. So if they're able to handle Henderson as well, I think this should be a very interesting matchup.
And to further your point, Matt, not only have they been effective, these Indiana running backs, but they've also been involved in the passing game. And that kind of goes along with your point, Caleb, where those two groups, the quarterbacks, most likely Connor Bazelak, and the trio of running backs, that's where they can really connect because they have caught over 4 touchdowns the running backs have this year, which is very valuable to have for running backs. I'm going to go to the defensive side of the ball, and I'm going to go to Aaron Casey, the linebacker for IU. He's their leading tackler. He's 3rd in the Big Ten in tackles, but he's really good behind the sticks as well. He's got 9.5 tackles for a loss. Look for him to play an impact in pass coverage, but also to try and stop the run or get the quarterback behind the line.
And a guy we didn't mention, Dasan McCullough, on the defensive side, the outside linebacker, the freshman for Indiana, is tied for the lead in the country for tackles for loss. He was going to be an Ohio State Buckeye. He opted to decommit and go to Indiana because his dad's the running back coach there. So he's also a threat for Ohio State. And with the running game not been what it's been the last couple of weeks, McCullough could take advantage and have a good day for the Hoosiers when it comes to tackles or tackles for losses.
Let's get into our Barrio ad read here so we can get onto our keys to the game and our score predictions. Barrio Tacos is now open right in the heart of Ohio State's campus at 15th Avenue and High Street. Barrio Tacos is serving tacos and margaritas late night every night and has an incredible happy hour with half-off margs and $1 off tacos weekdays from 3 to 6 p.m. Don't forget Barrio Tacos accepts Buck ID and is offering to-go and DoorDash options. You can also catch Barrio Tacos inside the shoe during game days at Section 10A and at their taco truck, which is parked Mondays to Fridays outside the RPAC on Ohio State's Columbus campus. Gentlemen, we finally get the Section 10A back after 2 weeks on the road. It's finally back in Ohio Stadium. I'm excited about that.
Absolutely. And who doesn't want to go to Section 10A and grab some tacos?
Well, my dad did. As we saw, I keep referencing the picture. I should put it up at some point, but I keep referencing the picture. He loves that.
Just make it the thumbnail at this point.
You know what? If we weren't 4 good-looking gentlemen, or at least 3 good-looking gentlemen, I would have put that as the thumbnail. But alas, here no.
I was pointing at Kole.
Don't point at Kole here. What the heck? That was a self-burn, or intended to be a self-burn. Nothing against our favorite Worcester native Kole Emplit over here. Getting into our keys to the game here, Ohio State for me, it's what I talked about earlier. I don't feel like I need why waste time say lot word when few word do trick. I already said it already. You need to put the full offense on display. It's got to be a showcase where the weather probably not going to be a factor. Crowd, it's yours, not going to be a factor. Ohio State being a better team on paper, defensive caliber of the opponent, not going to be a factor. There are no excuses here if Ohio State has a bad performance specifically in the receiving spot.
Yeah, just quick weather update. Tyler, I saw you checking the weather. What is supposed to be the weather for Saturday night's game? Or Saturday's game?
Saturday's game, there's going to be a little bit of a cool down over the next couple of days, so I appreciate you pointing that out, Cole. 51 degrees as of right now is the game time temperature around noon, 1 o'clock on Saturday. There is about a 30% chance of rain in the forecast, but again, we're recording this on a Thursday. This is going to be out on Friday, so anything can happen in the next 24, 48 hours.
At the very least, does the biggest question then to either poke a hole in my point or not, are there any 55-mile-an-hour winds on the forecast this week?
No, there are not.
Good.
And again, I'm going to confirm on my weather report, it's going to be about 45 at game time, so it's going to be a little bit colder. It's going to be a little bit colder, but still, nonetheless, no wind. That's going to play a factor.
It's a cloudy with the chance of touchdowns.
Well, that's
sorry, just had to put that in there.
New title for the episode. Hold on.
I might have been a creative genius, guys.
Well, thank you, Brick Tamlin, with the weather report. For all of us here at Channel 4 News, I'm Ron Burgundy. No.
I love lamb.
We can't get through a show without a movie reference. It's impossible. But Cole, appreciate you touching on it. Let's get back to, aside from the weather, what do you forecast for this week?
With that being said, if there's nothing problems with the wind, Kev, you hit on it. You have to see the whole offensive weapons at display. We highlight the wide receivers. They're probably one of the best wide receiver groups in the country. You get to see them get going. You see CJ get comfortable. Of course, he's going to be putting on, hopefully for Ohio State fans, more than 80 yards today, especially with the run game as well. Mayan Williams had just about 100-plus rushing yards. Of course, CJ had added himself 78-plus yards. But it's really how can their whole offense get going. We can see all their pieces really come together, and this is the time to do it, like I said, before they hit the road one more time, and then they had that showdown at the end of November.
Ty?
I would have to say getting pressure on the defensive side of the ball because Indiana, they're still down a couple guys in the offensive line, although they have a pretty good O-line in pass and run protection. But this Ohio State D-line is heating up. We know about JT Tuimoloau. Zach Harrison has been on fire over the last 4 weeks. But Ty Hamilton had a sack against Indiana last year. He made his second career start, first of the season against Northwestern last week. Javonte Jean-Baptiste has 3.5 sacks. So look for Jim Knowles in the Ohio State defense to really be aggressive and get behind the line of scrimmage to try and get to the quarterback Basilak.
Headed over to my right, Matty Goldman.
I like that nickname.
Do you?
Yes.
Yeah. It was supposed to be playoff Matty Ice, but then I remembered there's no real ice here.
That's okay.
Aside from maybe the Hebrew necklace, there's not much ice on there right now.
Likely. For Ohio State, I'm gonna stick on the offensive side. The offensive line. Can they get the running game going? That's where it starts. The running game up front, as always. Can they get their running backs open wide gaps? Can they get through them, or can they have their running game go on the outside and bounce off some tackles? So I think for Ohio State, just starting up front, can they get the simple stuff going? Just some power rows, jet sweeps, whatever they can do to just move up the field.
Switching the focus from the scarlet and gray to the cream and crimson now, talking about Indiana. You got to get something going. I put 3 words here on my outline of just get something going. And that I got to sum this up because I feel like that's not explaining what I'm trying to say here. You got to get something going. Whether it's not going to be a win, okay? Unless Ohio State comes out and they play so unlike themselves that Indiana is able to flip the odds on this, and we'll get to exactly what those odds are here in a minute when we get to our score predictions. Unless something drastic happens, Indiana fans should not expect a win here. It's just where they are. It's where they are as a team. No Ohio State bias here. But where I look at a victory being for Indiana is if you're able to get solid consistency running the football. If you're able to get 4 or 5 yards a play to start, even if you have to punt it away at the end, if you're at least showing signs of life on the offensive side of things, of course, as well, getting Basilak comfortable in the pocket because he's going to be your guy going forward, all signs point to, you got to come out here with some small victories. And to me, that looks like offensive consistency, even if it doesn't result in too many points.
We saw last week that anything can happen in Evanston. So you never know what can happen, especially in this year in college football. But you're right, Caleb. Getting consistency offensively is going to be the key. Can Indiana play keep up? I should add that it's 250 pass yards per game for Indiana, which is still hovering around the middle of the Big Ten. Yeah. They're going to need a big day throwing the ball. Looks like the weather is going to be rather calm, at least from a precipitation standpoint, so you can pass the ball and get the running backs involved in the passing game. Keep that going, because that's going to be a key for them to try and get an advantage over Ohio State.
Cool.
I'm just saying, everyone forget, Indiana has a top 25 win against Illinois. Beginning of the year.
That's true. That's true.
Anything can happen. But Tyler, you summed it up best. They're going to have to keep up with Ohio State. Defensively, I just don't think there's a way to stop the Buckeyes. If there's anything get going today, it's going to have to be on the offensive end. Like Caleb said, get some plays here and there. But in the end, if you don't get at least a couple good drives, you're down 2 scores at the end of the first quarter, it could be ball game already for Ohio State.
Illinois turning into, as well, the potential opponent Ohio State will meet in the Big Ten Championship, assuming they get there past Michigan to do so.
Yeah, we don't know. That Big Ten West is quite interesting.
Yeah, well, it started off being PJ Fleck's spot to lose, and it looks like the Golden Gophers lost it. Wisconsin came in challenging it. Iowa came in challenging it. Both of them have more or less fallen out of the sweepstakes. So I would say Illinois right now is in the best position to do it. Now, we still have a few weeks left of football here with the third game, including this one, left in the season, in the regular season, before we get into the conference championship spots. So it's still anybody's to win or lose in that Big Ten West division. But right now, Illinois being the front runner in my mind, at least. But Matt, switching over, defensive things to look for or anything to look for Indiana.
I'll stick on the defensive side. It's the open field tackles. Ohio State has all these playmakers, and if you can tackle in the open field one-on-one, that's where Indiana could take advantage, because Ohio State, we've seen on the screen passes that they had against Penn State, they had 10 screen plays for a total of 10 yards Ohio State. So if Indiana can get on the open field and use Aaron Casey, Tassan McCullough, some of the top linebackers in the Big Ten to tackle Ohio State's Emeka Egbuka, Marvin Harrison, the running backs, they could have a good day on the defensive side and limit Ohio State's offense as much as possible.
Number 2, Ohio State, unranked Indiana, 12 p.m. at Ohio Stadium on Fox and on SGSR and SGSR TV on YouTube. The countdown to kickoff on SGSR scheduled for approximately 11 a.m. from the field. We'll be on Twitter and Instagram before and after the game. Let's get into our score predictions. Final thing here before we let you go. Ohio State minus 40 on the spread with a 58 over-under line. I'm going to take Ohio State 59-6. I've said all my reasons throughout the show. Ohio State should have no hindering of their offense through the weather, through the defense, through whatever it is. Ohio State's defense is playing out of their mind. Tyler, you brought up JT Tuimoloau. Tommy Eichenberg, of course, being a mainstay on that defensive side as well. So I think everything is coming up Ohio State. I like that 54-7 that they had last time as well. Last season against the Hoosiers, so I'm not going too far off that. But let's start off with Matt, then we'll move to Kole and Tyler to wrap it up.
I'm going to say 45-14 in favor of Ohio State. I think it's a little lower than Caleb's just because we really don't know what this offense is capable of just because of last weekend. Yes, the weather was a little different, but I'm a little skeptical of just the way everything's going in the running back room with Travion's out 1 week, Mayan's out 1 week. Will both playmakers be back in time? So for Ohio State, I still think they dominate, but not dominate as much in the style points era. Just for Ohio State, the offense is too much for Indiana to handle, and I believe Indiana's offense is nowhere close to what Ohio State's defense can take over.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I think it's going to be, I'm going to say 52-13 for Ohio State. We've listed all the reasons. They want to put that Northwestern game completely behind them, and I just think their full offensive firepower is going to be at display on Saturday.
I'll add 2 points to that. I'll go 54-13, and I do believe that place kicker Noah Ruggles will go 3 for 3 on his field goals on Saturday.
He's going one up in the bets here, guys. How do we feel about Tyler trying to one up us with his calls?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I don't have it.
I agree with it.
What's the long on the field goal this weekend, though?
I say
good challenge.
So his career long, I believe, is 46, which he's hit twice, at least at Ohio State. So I'll take it one step further. I'll go 48.
Okay.
All right. It never ceases to amaze me what sticks around your head in terms of numbers. jealous isn't the right word because it's not strong enough, or it doesn't encompass entirely how I'm feeling about Tyler Danburg's brain, specifically in the sports department of things. That'll do it for us here on the Block O Show, presented by Barrio Tacos. For Tyler Danburg, Kole Emplit, and Matt Goldman, I'm Caleb Spinner. That's the show. We're out of here.